Good morning, everyone. My name is Teles. I'm the current PTL for Sahara. And today I'm going to present a little bit of what is Sahara. It's just a quick overview. And we're going to talk about the project updates, what have we done in Pike, what are we doing in Queens, and our plans for Rocky, and so on. First, we're going to start talking about a little bit of what Sahara does. So Sahara is considered the data processing project on OpenStack. That doesn't mean that ourselves. It means that facilitate the use of data processing engines on OpenStack. So how do we do that? We provide a way for users to deploy data processing clusters with the minimum effort possible. And we also provide a capability for users to manage these clusters and to submit jobs through our interface. A little bit of a project background. We started Sahara on Juno release. It's been a while. We started with Mirantis. And for this last cycle, I think there was Pike, we had 50 contributors to send at least one patch for Sahara. But this number doesn't actually tell the truth about Sahara itself, because we actually had only about 6 or 7 active contributors that sent at least 10 patches during the cycle. So there's a reality that's going through every project on OpenStack, and we're actually just feeling the same scenario. On the last user survey, we saw that 11% of clouds in production or test phase indicate they're using Sahara, and 3% are actually using in production, or 8% in test phase. And considering that 25% of users indicated they are interested in the Sahara project, and we're actually seeing this growth of interest every time, because we're actually making the product a little better, and I'm going to tell why just further ahead. Quick overview of Sahara. Sahara has 2 main points, clusters and jobs. These jobs are called the EDP, that's Elastic Data Processing. And the first one is cluster. So we provide the users a way to create clusters. And we do that by providing them with 2 templates. One of them is a node group template, and the other one is the cluster template. The node group templates are built using a specific processing engine components. So for example, if you're going to create a Hadoop cluster, you need to have data nodes, you need to have name nodes, and so on. And these node group templates are the organization of these services into one machine. And the cluster template is the organization of node group templates that's going to be creating the cluster. So for example, if you want to have one master node and 3 slave nodes, you're going to have one master node group template, one slave node group template, and on the cluster template, you're going to indicate how much of you're going to use on your cluster. The jobs part, the EDP part, is actually the more complex one, because we actually allow jobs, and we don't jobs itself, but allow the user to see the progress and get the result when the job is done. And for that, we have data sources, which are the places where the data for the jobs are stored. And right now, we are using Swift as a data source. We use Manila shares as a data source. And we're trying to grow that even more with more possibilities, S3, Ceph, and so on. That's plans for the future. The job binary is actually the file that you're using to run the job. So if you have a jar file or something, that has to be available for Sahara. And the job templates are the templates that are going to define how the job is going to run, where the data sources are, where the job binary is. So that's the job template. A little bit of the Sahara architecture. Sahara is highly dependent of other OpenStack components. So we depend on Keystone for authentication. We depend on the Horizon for our UI. We depend on Nova for instance creation. We depend on Heat for orchestration of the clusters. So something common that happens with Sahara is some people have a lot of problems when trying to use Sahara, but most of the problems are not Sahara itself, but from other projects that we depend on. And sometimes they update something that kind of breaks us. So this dependence is both good and bad. This Sahara is really an OpenStack project, but we always have to keep up with all things changing in all the projects so we don't break our project. Just a quick overview here on the image. You can see keystones on authentication. Inside Sahara, we have a REST API. We have CLI as well that can be used. Sahara, when it gets the request from the user, it's going to go to a provisioning engine that's going to create the instances. And the whole thing is a completely black box for the user. So the user is only going to say, I need a cluster with this configuration, and the Sahara does the rest. So the user only has to configure the templates on the beginning, and Sahara does the whole configuration, network, HDFS, and so on for the user. What are the new features and enhancements that we did in Pike? So one of the big things that we did in Pike was the ability to create and validate images using Sahara itself. So before we work on this feature, we used Disk Image Builder for generating images for Sahara. And Sahara needs those images because one way to speed up cluster creation is to have an already done image with the data processing engine installed on it. So for example, if you're going to use Hadoop, it makes sense to have an image with Hadoop installed on it. Otherwise, you're going to have to download during cluster creation, which is going to take a lot more time. So we used to create these images with Disk Image Builder, and it's actually still the recommended way right now. But we're changing into a new feature where we use libguessfs to instrument images. And actually, the big new thing that we're doing with this is actually the ability to validate the images. So we actually create the images, but before the cluster is created, we actually check if the image is proper for Sahara use. So this was not possible with the Disk Image Build approach. So we changed the libguessfs. We do a little more instrument into the image, and then we check if the image is proper for Sahara use, which saves a lot of time from waiting for the cluster to create, waiting for it to fail, then trying to figure out why it's not working. So we actually give the user a quicker feedback if the image is not properly created. We facilitated the addition of new data sources and new job types. So there was a refactoring on Sahara code recently done from one of the outreach interns that we had. And we kind of changed the way that data sources and job types are coded in Sahara. Before that, it was actually hard-coded, the types of jobs and data sources we had. And we switched it for, it's a kind of a new plugin source stuff. So it makes it a lot easier for new people that want a new data source type or a new job type to create. So it's a lot easier to implement that into Sahara right now. Something new, actually, we create Xenio images for Vanilla, Storm, and CDH. So OpenStack's changing all the images for Xenio, and we're following the trend. We updated our plugin versions, and then we're creating the images with the new distribution for Ubuntu. Now the most important part of this presentation are the new features that we're planning for Queens, which is the current cycle. Given that refactoring you did for data source stuff, a lot of ideas came up of what new data sources would be useful for Sahara. And one of the common ground that we started was S3. So S3 is a big data source, is something that's very important for us. And a lot of users actually requested that we introduce S3 into Sahara. So we actually have an ongoing implementation of S3 data source in Sahara right now. We are very confident that we're going to be able to deliver in Queens, but it is something that I can't say for sure. Our team is small, and we don't have too much hands working on it, but we're hopefully going to be able to deploy it in Queens. Another feature that we're planning for Queens is exposing API v2 by default. API v2 is a long implementing issue that we have in Sahara. API v1 that we have right now, it's very confusing and it's hard to maintain. And we've been blocking new features because we don't want to break API v1 anymore. And API v2 is going to be a big thing for Sahara. It's going to give possibility for new features. It's going to facilitate management of the whole thing. The whole API is cleaner and easier for the user understanding. And we're hoping our first plan, just at the PTG in the beginning of the year, was to deliver API v2 fully as the main API for Sahara, but we're not that confident anymore that's going to happen. So we're planning to deliver API v2 by default, but as an experimental. So we're not going to tell the users, go to API v2 because it's stable and you can use safely. We're going to tell them, if you want to use it, we can support, we can help you out. But the stable and the most important one is still API v1. But yeah, that's something that we've been working for a long time, and there's a lot of people come and go on this work, so it's not that easy to finish it up. But hopefully we're gonna be able to finish in Queens or in Rocky. Another feature that we're looking for is plugin outside of Sahara code and decommission of a specific node. Those two are two separate stuff, so I'm gonna talk first about the plugin outside of Sahara code. Sahara is a plugin-based, use a plugin-based structure for the data process engines. So we have a plugin for CDH, we have a plugin for Storm, we have a plugin for Hadoop. All of those are very easily removable, or you can add a new plugin to the Sahara if you want a new data processing engine. One thing that we found very hard to do was how do we get a new version of a plugin into an OpenStack deployment that is running, and we need something new there. We faced that issue back on our work, and it was saying that for that upgrade to happen, we will actually have to wait for a new OpenStack release to come out, and then upgrade the whole OpenStack cloud, so we'd get a new version of a plugin in Sahara. That is kind of a big work for just a small plugin upgrade. And we're planning to take the plugins part of Sahara outside of the Sahara main code, create a new library with it, and then we can release in a different release cycle other than Sahara. Then if you need to upgrade a plugin, you can just upgrade the plugins library, and you're going to get the new plugin. And it's a little bit challenging because we have to make some API security management, so you don't install something that's not compatible with the current API that you have. But it's a plan that we have for Queens or Pike, depending on how much work, or Rocky, depending on how much hands we have to work on it. But we believe this is going to make a lot easier for people to get Sahara actually working and maintaining the whole plugins updated without having to wait for a whole 6 months for a new OpenStack. And most people don't actually upgrade OpenStack right away after the release. They wait a little bit. They have stuff running. So this is going to make it easier for new plugins to come into live without having to wait for a new version of OpenStack. Another feature is decommission of a specific node. Sahara allows clusters to be scaled up and down. And that's actually a great feature because sometimes we're using some stuff and we need more clusters. Sometimes we're not using too much and we can reduce our cluster for reducing costs of resources, of maintaining the resources there. And right now, you can only select the specific node group from which you want to remove your instance. So for example, I have a cluster which has a master node, and it has two types of slaves, one that's only for data nodes and the other one for resource manager or something. And you can only select which one of the the node group's going to lose a machine, but you can't select the specific machine that you're going to lose, that you want to remove from your cluster. And we want to implement this feature, so we're going to give the users the option to select the specific instance that he wants to remove from the cluster. This is necessary because sometimes some issues are happening with a specific machine, and you want to remove that to improve your cluster health. So it's been a request from a user, and it's something that makes sense for us, and we're trying to implement for Queens. And that's, I believe this is going to be done in Queens because it's not too much work, and we're pretty strong, have a pretty strong confidence that we're going to deliver in Queens. Just putting a little bit on topics, our teams for Queens release, we're not focused too much on scalability right now. Resilience is a minor focus. We always have to keep an eye on it because we always have to keep the clusters healthy. We always have to recover if anything happens. But we're actually in a pretty good state for that, but not a big focus for us. Manageability, also a minor focus, as interoperability, security as well. But we're really focusing on modularity, and that's because of the removing the plugins out of Sahara code, trying to make that a little more modular on Sahara. And we're actually trying to improve a lot of the user experience. A lot of people have complained that getting started with Sahara is not too easy, so we're trying to improve how to create the clusters. We have a new default plugins, default node group templates, default cluster templates, and so there's something that we're trying to improve to make it a lot easier for people to get started with Sahara. What are the features that we're trying to deliver in Rocky? Rocky is going to be the next release of OpenStack, and we have to finish API v2 by Rocky. That's something that's kind of mandatory for us. We can't postpone it anymore, so it has to be put as a priority for us. We're working on health repair. There are some manual steps on managing lifecycle of Sahara cluster. We're trying to remove all of that, trying to automate as much as we can so we can do some health repair. We're going to start with small stuff, but we're trying to work it up into a pretty good health repair system on Sahara. So we're going to try to always keep the cluster running, independent of, unless like a big tragedy happens and you lose it all. But we're trying to work as much as we can to keep the cluster always running if it's the user will. Force delete is also something that's we need to do. There's a long-hanging problem in Sahara. When deleting a cluster, if there is some problems during the communication of the delete, some resources just hang there. So for example, the instances are removed, but the heat stack is not removed properly. And if you look in Sahara side, it's going to be like cluster deleting, even though there's no resources more to delete. So it just hangs there with a deleting state, but it's not actually deleting. So we're trying to add a new feature that's called force delete, so we can actually clean that up so you don't have to see that information that's wrongly there. And we're trying to improve the user experience with that so you don't see that wrong information there on your screen. We're focusing on manageability and user experience as well for Rocky. Resiliency is a focus, especially with the health repair and the force delete, but we can't promise too much. As I said, our team is very small, and we usually, we believe we have 3 people actually working on development on Sahara right now. The other ones are QA or working on the CI part of Sahara. So we don't have too much people working. So we can't promise too much at each release. And from the last PTG, we had a list of at least 20 priority stuff that we need to do for Sahara. And with only 2 people, that's a lot of work. So we're trying to spread that out into the next releases, trying to do the best we can. There is a question for Sahara on the next user survey. And this question is, what services would you like to see supported in Sahara? So what kind of, from top to bottom, like from UI to data processing engines, what do you see as something important for Sahara? And if you have any inputs, if you have any suggestions for us, I'm here until Wednesday. You can just look me up. My IRC is Teles Nobrega, and you can just look me on an OpenStack Sahara channel. We're always open for input, and we need user input to make our project better every time. So thanks, everyone. And if you have any questions, just feel free to ask them. Yep.
So how well is this working? I haven't tried it.
We have reported, users reported that they're trying it, and it's successfully deploying OpenStack Sahara clusters using Ironic right now. So it is, we have full support of that.
You guys thought of having some kind of integration with that and like nodes that have the GPU support, some kind of facility for using GPUs?
No, we haven't thought of that. We haven't. Sure, that makes sense. Yeah, we can talk later for sure, so we can get into a little bit deeper on that. But sure, that makes sense. Yep.
You mentioned using libguestfs to build images. Is
Yep.
that something you see being maybe more generic, or is it really talking to practice?
We've seen some other projects using it as well, but I can't say for sure. That's something that it is a trend on OpenStack. But we're using Sahara for both easing the user experience, because creating images with Disk Image Builder is a little bit overwhelming for some people. I've had reports from different users that took like 3 days to set up a new machine with a virtual environment and then running Disk Image Builder to create a Sahara image. We have some ready images that you can download from Sahara files, but if you wanted to build your own or add some stuff to it, it's a little bit complicated. And changing to libguestfs is gonna make things a lot bit easier, because the user himself won't have too much responsibility on it. It's gonna be more on the Sahara side. It's just gonna be a small command line, just like Sahara image pack, and then you'd say, I want a vanilla plugin running Hadoop 2.8, and then the image is going to be created and validated from Sahara to see if it's properly working. So that's why we're changing. It's going to be a lot easier for the user and quicker, because libguestfs, one of the things that makes it great and that this image builder doesn't have right now is because we can incrementally change the image. So we can start installing some stuff on the image, and if it breaks, then we get the same image and we start from that point. On Disk Image Builder, it every time downloads a new image to work on it. So we're going to lose a lot less time creating images on Sahara using libguestfs because of this incremental manipulation of the images. Yep. And I guess we should wrap it up because people are coming up for the next talk. Sorry for being late. Thank you, everyone.